How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Aleph, Daf 71 of Masechta Gittin. Friends. Okay, boom. Okay, yeah, we're going to get up to the next Mishnah today, and I was thinking that we should probably do the next Mishnah, but it's like kind of hard. So then I was thinking let's just kick the can down the road. So we're going to do it tomorrow. I'm a little bit nervous for tomorrow because I think tomorrow might be pretty hard. That's what happens when you kick the can down the road. Well, at least today will be a little bit easier. Okay, well, alright, we're going to start in Daf Ayin Amud Beis, 2 dots, like 5-6 lines from the bottom. I realized actually I probably could have done this yesterday. I probably should have done this yesterday, but alright, we'll do it now, it's not hard. Alright, here we go, and then we get into some kind of stuff. Alright, so we're going to start in Daf Ayin Amud Beis, 2, 4, I think 6 lines from the bottom, or 7. Okay, so you have a fellow who became mute. He was unable to talk anymore. And they said to him, shall we write a get for your wife? And he what does he do? He nods, right? Right, he nodded. So he said, Bodkin also shlosha paimim. I'm reading the Mishnah on Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis. Imamar alav lav al hein hein arei elu yichtavu v'yitnu. Right. So if you have a fellow who's all of a sudden unable to speak, so we ask him, right? If they say to him, should we write a get for your wife? And he nods his head in a way that means yes or no. So then we can basically just check that yes means yes and no means no, and then we can divorce his wife. Dilma shichya dilav lav nokte inami shichya dehene nokte, but maybe he's got some kind of like involuntary muscle spasm that is causing him to nod yes and nod no. So Amar Yosef Amanyomi Amar Nachman Da'aminan lei b'seirugin. Well, we say it to him at like intervals, like we don't just ask him, like in quick succession, but in intervals, and that seems to solve the issue. But wait, but maybe he's got this involuntary muscle spasm in intervals. Chad lav v'trein hein, followed by v'trein lav v'chad hein. Well, we ask him 6 questions. First one is a nisht, followed by 2 yoz, followed by 2 yoz. Wait, what? No, chad lav v'trein hein, 1 nisht and 2 yoz. V'trein lav and 2 nisht, v'chad hein and 1 yo. Whatever. You basically do it in a way that it would be, the involuntary muscle spasms would you would trick the involuntary muscle spasms. Okay, fine. Such a pattern would overwhelm any such spasms and would bring out the truth. Tevere Bishmal, I once met somebody who told me that he was here to seek the truth. Okay. I hope he found it. Okay. Tevere Bishmal Tana. The Tana Besmejish for Bishmal. Omim lo dvarim shel yemos hachama b'mos hagasham v'sheyemos hagasham b'mos hachama. And we say, in the winter they ask him stuff that do you want stuff that normally would be summer items, and in the summer they say, hey, do you want these items that would normally be appropriate in the winter? Mind you, what are we talking about? If you're saying, so basically like in the summer they say, hey, do you want your heavy winter coat? And he says, yeah, I want it. And it's like, all right, this guy's off his rocker. But if you say in the winter, hey, it's freezing outside, should we get you some lightweight linen clothing? He's like, yeah, I'd love some lightweight linen clothing. This guy's off his rocker. But if he says no, so then we know, okay, he knows what's flying. But one second. Maybe he's asking for a heavy coat because he got the chills, or maybe he wants light clothing because he's got a fever. Rather the fruits. Let's see, what are the fruits in Eretz Yisrael? Right, so like in the winter you wouldn't have mangoes and cherries. So if you say, hey, Cham Yankel, you want mangoes and cherries? He says, yeah, I want mangoes and cherries. We say, gotcha, they're out of season. Or if in the summer well, what's a winter fruit? Like citrus? I think that's like grapefruits. Grapefruits are around in the winter, I think. So they say, hey, Chamyanko, you want grapefruits? He's like, yeah, grapefruits. And like, you're off your rocker. Okay. So now this coming sugya is be'etzim going to take us to the end of our daf today. Not really the end of the daf, if I could be honest. Really only about halfway through Amud Beis, but that's our daf, not the daf, but our daf, because for us it's our daf. Okay. This is daf Ayin Aleph for us. Okay. Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav. So it says Rav Kahana in the name of Rav Cheresh, sheyachol ledaber mitoch aksav, kosvin venosnin get leishto. All right. Excuse me, I'm just going to babble on quick. All right, that was nice. Okay. So, I stretched too. Yawn, stretch, everything I need to get ready for this sugya. Okay. So you have a fellow. Okay, so you have a fellow who got married, and when he was married, he was a pikeach. When he was married, he was lucid. He was 100%. He was not a cheresh. Then he became a cheresh, and now he's mamish a cheresh, as we're going to see in a minute. Where there's also a cheresh, just somebody who's deaf but can speak. Now, okay, that's a deaf person, but that's not a cheresh, right? When we talk about a cheresh, we're talking about a cheresh, a person who's deaf and also can't speak. That's a cheresh. So now, in this case, the person was a pikeach before when he got married, and he only became a cheresh afterwards, and he still knows how to write. So says Rav Kahana, the name of Rav, that if you have a cheresh who knows how to write, and he writes, what does Rashi say in the second Rashi on the page? He says, third Rashi on the page? Third Rashi on the page. That he knows how to write on a piece of parchment. Kisvu usnu get liishti, write and give a get to my wife. Atem ploni ufloni, you so and so and so and so. Umoster loim, and he gives the document to them. He's completely lucid and okay, he can't speak, he can't hear, but if he writes this down, so we can follow his instructions. So again, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav, cheresh sheyachol ledaber, a cheresh sheyachol ledaber mitoch aksav, that he's able to communicate via writing. So if he writes to you to give a get to his wife, so we write and we give a get to his wife. Amr of Yosef, so if Yosef says, no, what's the big deal? We have a Mishnah already. Nishtatik, our Mishnah says, if a fellow, all of a sudden he becomes mute, he can no longer speak. And they said to him, should we write a get to your wife? And he nodded his head. Both can also shlosha paimim, so we check him 3 times. So we can give a get to his wife. So we already see that this fellow who became unable to speak, we can give a get to his wife. So Omar Lei Reb Zeir, but Reb Zeir says to Yosef, I don't understand. Ilim kamart. These are apples and oranges. Rav Kahana is talking about a shote, a fellow who's unable to speak and unable to hear. That's a shote. You're talking about an ilim, somebody who simply is unable to speak, but he can hear. Shani ilim, the Tani we learn in a brayso, medaber ve'eno shomea zeu cheresh. A fellow who can speak but can't hear is deaf. But again, this is not the cheresh that we generally talk about, like cheresh shota v'koyin. A cheresh a general cheresh is can't hear but also can't speak. Somebody who simply can't hear but he can speak. That's a cheresh. Shomea ve'eno medaber, somebody who can hear but he doesn't speak. Zeu ilim, that's an ilim. V'zeh v'zeh rein kepikrin l'chol devreim. And in both of those cases, if you can hear but can't speak, right, a mute, or somebody who can speak but can't hear, a cheresh, so they're considered like pikeachs in all regards. So therefore, Rav Yosef, I'm not sure what you're asking kashas from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is talking about an ilim. An ilim is like a pikeach. Rav Kahana is talking about a cheresh, but a cheresh who not only can't hear but also can't speak. And then as a side note, how do we know that somebody who can speak but can't hear, and somebody who can hear but can't speak? So how do we know that somebody who can speak but can't hear is called a cheresh, and somebody who can hear but cannot speak is called a mute? I'm a cheresh, I can't hear. And like an ilim, I can't speak. Okay, alternatively, what's an ilaim? Ilaim stands for ishtikil milule. Fine. That is words have been taken from him. He can't speak. Fine. Okay. Nu. So if Kahana had said that if you have a fellow who was a pikeach, then he became a cheresh, but he can communicate via writing, so he can divorce his wife. Rav Yosef had said, what's the big deal? We know this from our Mishnah, to which he said, yeah, but our Mishnah is not talking about a cheresh, it's talking about an ilaim. Omer Reb Zera says, Reb Zera, ikasha li, ha kasha li. But if there's a kasha to ask on Rav Kahana, it's the following. The Tanya that we learn in the Brisa, im lo yagid, prad le'ilaim. This is talking about Shvuas HaEdus. Who could tell me what Shvuas HaEdus is? If I understand correctly what Shvuas HaEdus is, I think that there's a parak in Masechta Shvuas called Shvuas HaEdus. I learned that about 15 years ago. So if I remember from 15 years ago, it is, I think it's also simply a, psukim in the Torah in Parshas Vayikra, I think. I don't know. Maybe it's out. Anyways, so Babylon. It's that if you know testimony about somebody, so you have to, right? Im lo yagid v'nosa avono. If you don't give the testimony, if you know testimony, you have to give it. If you don't give, then you're in trouble. And if they make you swear, right, if somebody says, "Do you swear that you don't know testimony?" and he says, "I swear," so then he has to bring what's called a korban shvuah. So now this doesn't apply to somebody who's unable to speak. It says im lo yagid. If he's unable to speak, prad le'ilaim, to the exclusion of somebody who's unable to speak, shen yochel lahagid, because he can't, he can't give the testimony. But am I? Why not? Yochel lahagid mitoch haksav. Let him write it. So that is Reb Zera's kasha. That Rav Kahana, if so, that a cheresh who can write down, who can communicate via writing, we can divorce his wife. So I guess we consider him like a pikeach. So if that's the case, or whatever, meaning if he could divorce his wife via writing, so why can't he give testimony? Shvuas HaEdus. Why can't he give testimony via writing? So Abai says, Ma pitom. You're talking about testimony. Shiny Edus. When it comes to testimony, testimony is an andre azach. When it comes to testimony, the pasuk says al pi shnei edim. Is that al pi shnei edim? That you have to verbalize it specifically. You can't write it down. You can't just write it down. So therefore, Reb Zera, don't ask me kashas about edus. Meisvei. We have a kasha on Abaye, that Abaye says you can't write down testimony. But one second, we have a brayse that says Kshim Shabotkin also the Gittin, that just like this fellow who can't speak, we check him with regard to Gittin, right? Meaning, right? If they say, should we divorce your wife, and he nods, so we make sure that he's nodding correctly, and we can trust him for a Gittin, we can divorce his wife. Also, if he wants to sell real estate, property, idios, if he wants to give testimony, rushos, and for inheritances, we just said that a fellow who can't speak can give testimony. Look, that's specifically by edus isha, testifying that a woman's husband is dead and that she can get remarried. That, right? Mishum aguna akilu bar abonon. That specifically in that case we're lenient, and therefore that's why he can testify. But in general, he would be unable to give testimony. V'akatani Yerushis, but it talks about inheritances. Isn't he talking? Aren't you talking about that this person who can't speak is able to testify about people's inheritances? No, it's talking about for himself that if he wants. Normally, of course, the Bechor gets twice as much as the other children, as the other sons. But if he wants, he could say, no, the Bechor gets as much as everybody else, and a Elaim would be able to testify regarding his own inheritance. Amr Babo says, Babo, Yushas Beno Bechor Katani. Fine, we just read that. Mias limasos limatanos. Katani mias. Dude, what? Where am I? Okay, fine. But what about for selling property? My love, the alma. So isn't that talking about that he could testify about real estate transactions for other people? No, his own transactions. Okay, so we didn't succeed. Meaning Abaye had said that that you have to speak when it comes to testimony, and if you can't speak, so then you can't. It doesn't work for testimony. We asked all sorts of kashas, but they didn't work. Okay, fine. Meisvei, now we have a kashan of kahana. We have a kashan of kahana, if I'm not mistaken. You have to remember which kashas are in who, which kashas are in Abaye, which kashas are in Rav Kahana. I believe this kasha is in Rav Kahana. We will confirm that in a second, but I'm 90+% sure that this is a kasha of Kahana. That Rav Kahana had said that, right, that if you have a fellow who is a cheresh, he was a pikeach, now he's a cheresh, and he's able to communicate by writing, you can divorce his wife. Meisvei. Cheresh, when it comes to cheresh, lo holchu bo achar mizosav v'achar kvitzosav, we cannot trust his signs, if he gives signs, gives noddings and stuff. Ve'achar ksav yodo, nor after his writing. El b'metaltalin, only by metaltalin, aval lo legittin, but not for a gittin. So that's the kashan of Kana, because Rav Kana says that a cheresh who can write, you can divorce his wife, but we're pretty clear in this brisa that a cheresh who can write we do not give a get to his wife. So what do we do with that? Tanaihi, it's machlokas tanoim detanim, because we have a brisa that says, Amr b'Shimon ben Gamliel, says B'Shimon ben Gamliel, Ba'meh devarim amurim, when do we say that a cheresh who can write cannot, so when do we say that, a cheresh cannot, we can't divorce his wife? B'cheresh me'ikaru. That's only if he was always a cheresh. That if, he was never pikeach, he was always a cheresh. So he can't get divorced. Aval, pikeach v'nischaresh. But if he was not a cheresh, he was a pikeach and then he became a cheresh, hu kosev, ve'en chosman, he can write the get. Right? He can't hear, he can't speak, but he can write. So he can write the get, ve'en chosman. And then other people sign it. So we see that, just like there was a brisa that says that by a get, a cheresh, you can't write a get for a cheresh, even if he can write. But we have a brisa where Shimon Gamliel says that no, if he was a pikeach v'nischaresh and he can write, so let him write a get and we'll give it, we'll sign it and give it to his wife. So, so Rav Kahana holds like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Fine. V'cheresh me'ikar lo, Friends, you hear the kasha? We just said that a cheresh who was always a cheresh cannot get divorced. V'cheresh me'ikar lo, kishem she'kon sabir miza, kach motzi bar miza. But I don't understand. Why can't a cheresh me'ikara get divorced? When he gets married, a cheresh who gets married midrabanan. He signals that that he's going to get married, and he gets married midrabanan. So let him get divorced midrabanan. I don't understand what's the problem. So ibi ishta achinami. Look, if you're talking about his wife, ein achinami, of course he can get divorced from his wife, right? If you have a cheresh who gets married, so he's married midrabanan, he can get divorced midrabanan. Of course, that's fine. Here we're talking about where he got married to his wife through Yibum, that his brother was married to this woman, his brother died, and now because of Yibum he's married to her. So he was a cheresh all along, but he's currently married to his wife via his brother, via Yibum. Now tell me about his brother. Well, if his brother was also a cheresh, well then his brother's kiddushin was also midrabanan, so let this cheresh get divorced midrabanan. So just like she got married to the first brother with remiza, because he was a cheresh, so also let the second brother divorce her biremiza. So what's the problem? So well, the brother was a pikeach. The brother, was a pikeach, and therefore his brother was married to this woman mida oraisa, and now via yibum, she was married to the first brother mida oraisa, which means that her zika to the second brother, which is coming from her initial D'oraisa marriage, is a Zika Mid'oraisa. And therefore, that is why a Pikeach Meikara, he's right, this brother who's not doing Yibum, is a Cheresh Meikara. Now this brother who's doing Yibum is a Cheresh now, as well as was a Cheresh, right? The brother who died was a Pikeach, so therefore the initial marriage was Mid'oraisa. Yibum therefore is coming from that Mid'oraisa marriage, and the Yibum happens with this brother who's a Cheresh. And not only is he a Cheresh now, but he was always a Cheresh. So then they're kind of stuck. In that case, he can't get divorced because he can only divorce Mid'Rabanan. But the Yibum is coming via Mid'Oraisa. Okay? So that's what we mean that a Cheresh Me'ikara cannot get divorced when the marriage came via Yibum. V'iba Yisema. Alternatively, you could say that the brother was also, right? The first brother was a Cheresh as well. Well, if that's the case, then shouldn't the second brother, since the Yibum was only Mid'Rabanan, can't he just divorce her Mid'Rabanan? What's the problem? But we're concerned that, you know what, in the case when the first brother was a Cheresh, we say that the second brother cannot get divorced out of concern for when the first brother is a Pikeach. Because in that case, the second brother certainly can't get divorced as a Cheresh. If that's the case, that we're making a gezerah out of a case of Yibum when the first brother was a Pikeach, why don't we say the same thing by the wife of a Cheresh? That if a Cheresh gets married, he can't get divorced out of concern that if he is in a situation where he's married because of Yibum by a brother who's a Pikeach, he wouldn't be able to get divorced. So also by his regular wife, he can't get divorced. So the Gemara answers, Yevimto b'yevimto michalfa, ishto b'yevimto la michalfa. No, two types of Yibum situations you can get confused by, but not a regular marriage and a Yibum marriage, right? So meaning, Yibum via a brother who's a Cheresh, and Yibum via a brother who's a Pikeach, those two can get mixed together, right? Because you'll say, by this Yibum you can get divorced, maybe by that Yibum he can get divorced. But by, if you have a Cheresh who marries a woman, Mid'Rabanan, he can get divorced Mid'Rabanan. We're not concerned that in the situation where he gets married via Yibum, via a brother who's a Pikeach, we don't make that, we won't confuse, we won't mix up those situations, right? Yibum and Yibum can get mixed up. Yibum and regular marriage, we won't get mixed up. But then, Frek the Gemara, but 1 second, is that really a concern of ours? That when this fellow gets married via Yibum from his brother who is also a Cheresh, he can't get divorced, right? He can't divorce this woman who he married via Yibum out of concern for when the brother is a Pikeach. Right? Meaning, right? So when the brother was right? So he can't divorce when he married this woman via Yibum when the brother was a Cheresh out of concern for when the brother is a Pikeach ve'otnan. But that's not, we don't actually worry about those cases. We learn in the Mishnah. Okay, it's from Yevamis. Let's not get too worried about it. Shnei achin chereshin, if you have two brothers who are chereshes, nesun shtei achayos pikchos, married to two sisters who are pikachas. So they're two sisters. Now the marriage is only midrabanan because both brothers are right, each marriage is only midrabanan because they're chereshes. O shtei achayos chereshes, or all four of them are chereshes. O shtei achayos achas pikachas v'achas chereshes, one's a pikachas, one's a chereshes. But again, in all of these cases, both brothers are chereshes. So the marriage is only midrabanan. V'chein shtei achayos chereshos, nesuos shnei achin pikchin, or two sisters who are chereshes married to two brothers who are pikachas. Or both brothers are chereshes. Or two brothers, one a pikeach, one's a cheresh. But again, all of these marriages are midrabanan. There's no need to do yibum or chalitza because, anyways, it's achos isha. Achos isha, right? Because if you want to do, right, if one of the brothers dies, well, the other brother is married to the sister of the person who needs to do yibum, so that's a erva, so forget about it. But but if the two wives were not sisters, Well, then what happens is the brother who's alive does yibum, even though it's yibum midirabanan, right? Because we're saying both brothers were chereshes, and you do yibum, and then v'imratza la'otzi yotzi. And if they want to get divorced, then get divorced afterwards. So here you see that a cheresh who gets married via yibum from a brother who's also a cheresh, they can get divorced, and we don't make the gezerah about the brothers of Pikeach. So the machvata kiddushanim meikar, rather it makes more sense, like the first answer that we gave, which is simply that when we say that a cheresh meikara, that he was always a cheresh, can't get divorced, that is talking about specifically when he got married via yibum from his brother who's a pikeach, because the yibum is midoraisa, and he would only be able to get divorced midorabanan, so therefore he can't get divorced in that case. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, chalukin olav chaver avar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. However, says Rabbi Yochanan, the chacham argue on Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel had said that a cheresh, right, a pikeach, or what does it say? What was it? Pikeach v'nischaresh, is that what it was called? So if he was a pikeach and then he became a cheresh, then as long as he can write, he can get divorced. But the rabbis argue and they say, no, even if he can write, he can't get divorced. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan chalukan olav chaver of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's colleagues argue on him. Amar Abai says, Abai afon nami taninu. We also have a brisa. We also have a mishnah that proves that the rabbis argue on him, because it says nishtes, that if you have a woman who becomes a shota, lo yotzi, he can't divorce her. Even if he's a pikeach, she becomes a shota, he can't divorce her. We're going to see at the end, right, in a few lines, that technically he could divorce her, but even though she's a shota and she doesn't have das, but I mean, das is irrelevant, right? She can get divorced against her will, so you can divorce her technically. But we're concerned that if you have this woman who's a shota, and now she's divorced and left on her own, so people may take advantage of her. So nishtes loyotzi. So if she becomes a shota, he can't divorce her. Nischare shu onishtata. But if he becomes a cheresh, or if he becomes a shota, lo yotzi olamis, he can never. Now he's a shota or he's a cheresh, he can never divorce his wife. My olamis. What does it mean? Olamis, ever. Lava fagav de yochel ledaber mitoch aksav. Doesn't it mean even though he could communicate via writing, still he can't get divorced? So you see that the rabbis argue on Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Amr Papa says, Papa, actually, ilav da'ashmir and Rabbi Yochanan, if not for the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says that the rabbis argue on Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, hava amir Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel lefarushe time the Tanakh Muda also. I may have thought that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel agrees with the Chachamim, and he's just coming to explain their position. So if that's the case, then what do you do with, right, when it says that if he becomes a cheresh or shota, he can't divorce her olamis forever? We said that's talking about even in a situation where he can communicate via writing. We say no, if he can communicate via writing, he can divorce his wife. The olamis is afagav de chazina le decharv, meaning if he can't hear and he can't speak and he can't write, but we see in other ways that he is still sharp. No, still he can't get divorced. Alternatively, olamis is not actually talking about. What we learn from olamis is for Rabbi Yitzchak. The Rabbi Yitzchak says, Rabbi Yitzchak dvar Torah that mida oraise shotem is gareshes. That if the wife becomes a shota mida oraise, technically she can get divorced. Midava pikachas bal korcha, just like a pikachas can get divorced against her will, so also shota can get divorced even if she doesn't have das. Umatam amru enim is gareshes. Then why do we say that she doesn't get divorced? Shelo yinagu ba minig hefker. So that people shouldn't take advantage of her. If she's a shota and she's no longer married and she's on her own, people may take advantage of her. So the point is, how does that fit in with the olamis? So you can say that, look, I may have, if not for the fact that Rabbi Yochanan clarified that the rabbis are arguing with Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, I may have thought that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is explaining their opinion, and therefore, pikeach v'nischaresh, if he can write and express himself via writing, he can get divorced. Well, then how do you explain this brisa that says that if he's a cheresh or if he's a shota, he can't get divorced? Olamis is just coming to say that this is, so if he can communicate via writing, he can get divorced. But if he can't communicate via writing, he can't, if he can communicate via writing, he can get divorced. But Olamis is saying that if he cannot communicate via writing, then he cannot get divorced. And that's Midah Oraisa, as opposed to the ratio which is by Nishtat, that if she becomes a Shota, it doesn't say Olamis, because that's not Midah Oraisa, that's only Midah Rabbanon, out of a concern that people shouldn't take advantage of her. So the point of Olamis is really just to differentiate between the Reisha and the Seifa. Say the Seifa is talking about Midah Oraisa, whereas the Reisha is only Midah Rabbanon. But nonetheless, I would have thought to say that if you have a Pikeach v'in nischaresh, and he could still write, I would say that we can divorce his wife. So Kamash Milan Rabbi Yochanan, that no, Taka the Chacham argue and say that the Chacham argue that no, even if he can communicate by writing, he cannot get divorced. Friends, that was Daf Ein Aleph of Masechta Gittin. Okay. So what do we talk about? So we talked about at the beginning. We talked about if a fellow is mute and he can't speak, but he can communicate by nodding. So we just have to confirm that he's nodding accurate. That we're understanding his nodding, and then he can and we can divorce his wife. Rav Kahana had an interesting opinion that if you have a fellow who was a pikeach and then he became a cheresh, but he could still communicate by writing, so we can divorce his wife. And that was basically the discussion of Daf Ein Aleph. Friends, okay, I'll catch you tomorrow. Tomorrow I think is going to be a challenging one, but alright, do what you got to do. Have a good one. Peace out.